We spoke last week, or I did most of the talking, didn't I? I spoke last week about full service church. And where at least I ended up with that is the idea that full service, who knows quite what that means, but we definitely need to be a church full of service, right? And servicing any need that we physically, spiritually are able to address. And that's exactly what Jesus came to do. It's what he empowered his Christians, his disciples to do. And that's what we are aiming, striving to do. I want to take a step beyond that, but yet on the same vein as we think about full service church and talk about our youth. Why we must focus on our youth. Dianodches lived, if I'm not mistaken, right around 400 years before Christ. Almost 400 years before Christ. This was his statement. The foundation of every state is the education of its youth. The foundation of every state is the education of its youth. Now, I want to be clear about this. I'm not talking about exclusive attention to the youth, but there needs to be special or heightened focus. There needs to be a lot of attention given to the youth. Darius Daniels made the statement as he was starting an independent religious group. And after some time, as they began to grow, he said, we came to this realization. We cannot leave the state of our youth, the condition of our youth, the responsibility of our youth with a small group of people or committee in the church. We must have everyone full on board, engaged with addressing our youth. And I heard him make that statement live just almost a year ago. And at the time he stated, what's he talking about? We do a lot for youth here at Summerville, and it's been one of our focuses. But what does he mean with everyone engaging in the youth? And one of my focuses, I think you've heard me several times state from the pulpit and in private, is that we need every demographic. We need every generation, and each generation is going to provide its own set of skills and assets to the church that are essential for our growth, for not surviving, but thriving in our communities. So then, how can we say that we must focus, use all these demographics to focus on the youth? I'll explain that hopefully as we go throughout our lesson tonight. Oh, and I'll explain this in a moment. Corey, can I volunteer you? Be an official counter? You know, he's like, sure, what's he talking about? I figured you'd be a good counter.
Okay.
Okay, so if you are under the age of 20, raise your hand here tonight. This hand should be up. 7? 8? That's why I have you on the board. Oh yeah, there is somewhere. If it's not there, it's back there. So, okay, we're going with 8. 20 and under, 8. All right, now let's go from 30. Oh, I'm so disappointed. I was hoping Stephanie would be here for this. 30 to 40. It doesn't matter Stephanie's not here because she wouldn't get to raise her hand anyhow. That's the part I really want. Raise your hand if you're 30 to 40. There's one back there. 3? Okay, 3. Now, 40 to 50. Oh, that's me, Amanda. Just 3 of us? Oh, yeah, and Stephanie. We've got to count Stephanie. So 4. Okay, 4. 50 to 60. Just 1. That one surprises me. Yeah, 1. We should have taken total population, too. 60 and above. $18. That's what I had. Some of their hands were getting tired. Oh, all right. So, thank you, Corey. We don't have to be mathematicians to see what just happened there, right? Oh, I forgot to come back. 20 to 30. This is the depressing one. None. Guess what? That fragment of generation, if you will, which no longer is millennials, by the way, it's Gen Z, is missing. Not just here. Not just here. In churches. I think we saw, we had 18 at 60 and Bob, and basically Dean, Eddie, and Barb's, I'm going to kind of round it. Basically, we had 20-year range there, right? Not a 10-year range. A little bit more, but we won't get into details. So there was a few extra there, but still 18. The next largest group by far was our youth at 8, right? And by the way, particularly on Sunday night, that's wonderful, right? And we are by far exceeding the trends in those areas. But here's the scary part. And I want you to know this up front. Tonight's a positive message. Here in about 30 seconds you're going to wonder about it. And after that count, you're going to wonder about it. But yes, there's our demographic. Did you hear all the fun we had at your expense? Oh, it was a ball. So, does anyone know what this is here? You cheated. 70%. Okay? It's a pie chart. There's 70%. Then someone other than my household, you know what this is? Chase, tell me what that is.
Circle.
A circle. You are awesome. Good job. Spot on. Casey, did she help you with that?
I would have been able to figure it out.
Oh,
It's obvious.
It's obvious.
Yeah. It's either 90
Jim,
or 10.
did you think that was obvious?
I did know.
Wait, I just realized something. You got me distracted. My question was, did she tell you that? And you got me Did she do this at home? You completely got me off on a different topic.
I just didn't answer the question.
You're right. That's my point. All right, that's okay. If you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. You're good. All right, 70%, 90%. That is the range at which we are losing our youth. 70 to 90%. Now, why at that 20 and under do we have so many? And at 20, because they're still under my control, under your control, under the parents' control. Now, here for me is the most difficult part of this equation, because I think it's pretty easy to just start throwing rocks at others. I mean, that's what I do at my house. If something goes bad, it's Amanda's fault, right? And just blame it on someone else. That's an easy thing to do. But here I think is a difficult thing for any of us to do, let alone all of us to do. These are the people who know us best. These are the people who know us best. And we can talk about evangelism. And you know I talk about and I try and engage in it. You can't put enough emphasis on evangelism. But when we are losing 70 to 90% of the people who know us best, we've got issues other than just reaching out, don't we? And so I told you today's going to be a positive. One more negative slide, and then we're going to move on, because I think with identifying these, we're not going to be able tonight to name every problem to give the answer to it, but by identifying the problem, it gives us a way to fix it. And I think these are very fixable problems. We just have to admit they're problems. And until we accept responsibility for them, we can't do anything about it. For as long as it's their fault, we're just going to continue in the same direction. So this is the number. So this is, the bottom line is 18 to 39 years old. So basically, the category you just left, Stephanie. 40 and under, right? Now, unfortunately, to make this real big and large for all of us to see really well, I had to cut off the years, okay? But this, what's interesting to me, I didn't know this before, right here, you see the 40-year-olds were outnumbered. Those under 40 outnumber those who are over 40. Does anyone want to tell me what year they think that is? Go ahead with the guess. That was a wonderful guess, a little bit off. What was the heyday of the church? '50s, '60, 1960 is where that is. Right? That's when we were growing at the fastest rate ever. For the next 10 years, we continued to grow at decreasing rates. Right? So we're still growing, just not growing as fast as the years prior. And then here's what's real interesting. At this point, we start to really get some separation, don't we? There's a big jump. That's 1970s. And then, right here, 2010, we're really, really getting separation, aren't we? Right? So, question is, why do we need to focus on the youth? Now, again, this is not the generation we all like to talk about, the millennials. This is Gen Z. Some statistics that are given about them. Is that positive? 78% believe in God. Positive. 74% see no value in church. That's not just negative, that's devastating, right? 61% think churches have too many problems. 48 is kind of what we talked about this morning, right? 48% have no time for church, just too busy. Here's what's interesting on that one. Allow me to pause, because we want to give the answers to these as we go forward. But let me pause on having no time for church. We all have 24 hours, right? This tells us they have no time for church. This tells us about the perception or the value of church to them, right? when they have no time for it. 36% think church is boring. Kind of thought about asking Jace that. It would depend on the moment to get what answer I would get, so I'm not certain of the answer I'd get. And then I think this is really telling. 8% see a religious leader as a role model. Right? So, again, it would be easy to point at these numbers. But here's the value. And when I work on difficult therapeutic cases with horses, here's some realities. 10% are going to get better no matter what you do. Even if I do the exact wrong thing, 10% are going to get better. I can be horrible and they'll get better. 10-15% are going to get, or not going to get better, no matter what we do. What am I working for? All those ones in between, right? So, am I saying that 100% of Gen Zs will be in the pews? No, not at all. I'm saying when we see overwhelming numbers like that, we need to sit up and say, wait, what's going on here? Here's some things I see. 74% have no value, see no value in the church. We talked a few weeks ago about relatability. I think that sometimes we can get so focused on theology, we can get so focused on arguing back and forth about who's right, that people walk away and wonder, why did I come? I think it's easy for churches to get in positions where we talk about everything that's wrong. I know what you're thinking. You're on the borderline or crossed over it there tonight, Mike. We can talk about everything that's wrong to the point that we walk away. What's the use? Right? I know there's a God, but when I go there, I feel worse about myself. When I go there, all I hear about is what I haven't done right, what I haven't done. That's what I see as at least a healthy chunk of those 74%. 61% are things I've already touched on, with the arguing back and forth. That one of the slides I think that's in our intro that, boy, it takes 100% buy-in that we have, or I have on there, and maybe before we can show the world what it's like to agree as Christians, we need to be able to show them what it's like to disagree as Christians. We've focused on the fact that we can't disagree. We disagree on that. The fact of the matter is we've got to learn how to disagree and do it well. I see that all through the New Testament. That's what Acts is at 15 with the Jerusalem Council is about. They learned to disagree. They did it really well. Church is born. Again, we're missing the relatability. How does this apply to my life? When Jesus came through your town, no one debated on whether he was talking to me or not. He was able to get right down where everyone understood how that impacted their lives. And I think when all these other things come into place, when you have religious leaders, technically I'd fall into those like me. You're going to have really low numbers, but when you improve the rest of that equation, people like Brandon end up rising higher on that, those 8%. Our perception of these people are different. So, why? The answer, I think, is focusing on the youth. Why? Churches are not likely to survive if we do not. The math isn't very hard here, is it? What do we look like? Extrapolate what's here tonight, move that down the road 10 years and 15 years from now. In just that short a time, those numbers are critical. I've been in more than one congregation where those numbers were over. They'd crossed that critical line. Although I think we need to realize that youth are not a commodity. And I think this is what is going to play out throughout the lesson tonight, is that we aren't trying to attract more youth so that they can continue my church. I think that's what we've tried to do. I think that's what churches, when I say we, I mean very generally speaking. That's what churches have tried to do. We need youth so that they can keep doing what I've always done, the way I've always done it. I'm so blessed to be in the congregation where I grew up. So I can relate to this very well. And I look out here, so many of you grew up here. And you have fond memories of the church of your youth. But I think one of the things that we've got to accept, and when I say we, I mean everyone except those really young ones we talked, that the church of my youth, the church of your youth, is not our goal. It can't be our goal. So they're not a commodity. They're not something gathered to do what I want them to do, or so they can continue what I have them. They are the source that's going to keep us relevant, us being the church. We talk a lot about not changing, and there's some things we don't want to change. Truth doesn't change. Although I hope we're growing in our understanding of it. But at this bottom side here, it's more than just continuing what I'm doing, what we've done in the past. It's that fresh view of things. Mike, when we started that conversation earlier, I didn't even think about this point being on here, but it gets, save a soul, save a nation. We want to save our nation, right? The answer to that, biblically, is focus on the youth. It's the hearts and souls of people. So we can do what a politician won't do, what a politician can't do. It's not about the right laws, it's about the right hearts. That's why we focus on the youth. That's where we at. This rate of change, last statistic, and then we'll get into these. I have 4 points tonight. It used to be the case when many of you were young that the world changed drastically every generation, approximately every 20 years. And I remember thinking when I was with Grandpa, we sat on the glider in his front porch where Gary, Pam and Dad grew up running around, and where Gary and Connie live. And I remember sitting there with Grandpa and talking about, the time he saw a first car ever drive down the road. I thought, wow, what changes you've seen. He talked about some of those changes he'd seen over the course of his life. But here's some of the latest numbers on this. It used to be that the world was drastically different every 20 years. Then, throughout the 80s and 90s, we have tech booms. It dropped down to 10 years. So it's no longer generational. The world is drastically different every 10 years. The last number, especially with AI, and I think rather we've got to realize this during COVID, and we think of all the changes in the last couple of years. The world is a brand new world every 7 years. 7 years. You know what? Sorry. How often we need new remotes? They don't last 7 years when I have them. Case in point, I was playing with this all day today. So you can't. Well, you'll have trouble seeing that. But this little black thing on the back of my phone, you know what that is? That's my new business cards. You give business cards out, they're thrown away now, right? I was playing with it. Oh, look, that's fun. Watch this. Oh, now he's able to call me. He's got our YouTube. He's got our Facebook. He's got our website all on there. Do you see it? It's right there. It's saved in his phone. Right? Did that exist 5, 7 years ago? If it did, I didn't know about it. Did you know about it? Right? You see, the world's drastically different every 7 years. Now, we're not talking about changing the truth, but to stay relative and to reach out. These things are important with how we do it. So, focus on ourselves. Here's 4 reasons that I think we must focus on the youth. It's because we don't have youth. We have young. We have a missing demographic. So in doing so, we focus on anyone other than ourselves. And that's why I think so hard for every church to do. And I think it's the single thing that Jesus came preaching. Don't focus on you. Focus on someone else. Mark 9 and 35. Whoop, going the wrong way. I have a marker in here for this very reason. Jesus made this statement to his 12. They're arguing about who's going to be the greatest. He says, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. We as a church must make sure we're not focusing on us. And that was a point that I talked about last week, about we do a lot of things for us. That's all right, but it can't be our focus. Acts, the 6th chapter, in verse 2, I made this broad statement last week. I think we've really missed this. And I'll explain what I meant by that now. In Acts 6 and 2, there's a need. And the apostles say, are we to quit preaching the word of God to serve tables? Now, they're talking about a great need. A great need. And they're saying, we can't do that. It would be quit preaching the gospel. And the reason I said last week that I think churches generally have missed this point, they hire preachers to preach to them and to serve them and go to the hospital to see them and to come to their houses to see them. And those are great things. I think every Christian would love to do as much as they can, including a preacher. But we've got to be careful we don't focus on ourselves. That's what the apostles, I think, were saying. We've got to be preaching the word. They're not preaching to Christians who've been Christians for years. In fact, beginning of Acts, they're growing. Acts 6, they're growing. Down just a few verses after they picked the 7 deacons, that we would call them, they're growing incredibly fast. Why is that? They're serving the needs and still reaching out to others. That's why I think focusing on that youth is important. We grow when we focus on others. I'm not talking numerically, although that happens too. But there's more important ways. In Deuteronomy, the 6th chapter, and in verse 6, if I'm not mistaken there, we have those incredible words by Moses saying, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind." And in the next verse, verse 7 says, "Teach these to your children." Why? He says, teach them to your children. Teach them to your children. It's, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4 times throughout that short reading. In verse 20 it says, when you get into this land, don't forget that it was I who put you there. And when your sons ask you, why do we do these things? You teach them. You tell them. You instruct them. Over and over we see it in that passage. Why was Moses telling them, when you get to this land, teach your youth, teach your youth, teach your youth? It was for 2 reasons. For one, the youth needed to hear it, but 2, because they grew when they taught. 2 Timothy 2:2, Paul tells Timothy to teach other men these things so that they may teach others. You know, we've talked it throughout, so we talked about honing our vision. We've talked about what it means to talk about the gospel, talk about God. And sometimes, again, the way we grew up doing it, you know, we sit down and we go to verse to verse to verse to verse. But what if we're just simply sitting down with people, looking at a verse or a passage and saying, here's Jesus. Here's what he means to my life. Teaching others teach others. Why? That's an important part of growth. It's how we grow. Titus 2, and I have 3 through 5 there because it's talking. Well, on this too long because we don't have any older women here. I did, or someone turned my mic off. I started talking about old women like it. To love their husbands, right? It's part of our growth. It's part of our growth. That's something that I've heard several times brought up that, you know, we could, having mentoring programs would be so beneficial. I've had young mothers ask for that, and it's a great need, right? So focusing on the youth helps us grow, not necessarily just numerically ourselves. Here's a big one. Jesus commands us to, right? Kevin read for us from Matthew 19 that we read earlier. But verse 37, Mark 9, 36 and 37, and he took a child and put him in the midst of them, and taking him in his arms, he said to them, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. Whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me. There, you know, Jesus is talking about. Again, and sometimes when I say these things, it may sound like saying, oh, we don't need to learn the Bible. We don't need to teach Bible. But, you know, there's age that are appropriate. Like Jace and Ella are memorizing. I know you've been doing a great job. I think Corey's been helping you learn your books of the Bible. And I've seen you guys do a great job with that. There's a stage where memorizing Scripture and learning Scripture in that way is very helpful. But, you know, these young ladies over here, they've got other concerns. They need to know how these Scriptures apply to their lives. Start talking, you know, we talk about everyone falling away when they get to college. Sometimes that's because no one bothered to answer their questions. You know, how does this relate to my life? How is this real? Remember we talked about seeing value in church? It's got to be something relevant for them. And lastly, I think this is the big one. Christianity is about the future. It's about the future. Heard an individual saying, and then we'll end with Hebrews 12 and 2, and I appreciate your patience tonight. But he said, I grew up and I became an adult and I was involved with the church, and I thought of all the wonderful things that the church did for me. Right. Stephanie, I think you could relate to that. And by the way, how four of the kids that I was in Bible study with here are preaching now full time. That's why I feel it all equipped to talk about this. I'm telling you what, and I look out, some of the teachers aren't here, some of them are. These are things that I understood when I left here, how this applied to my life. How to share it with others. It's about the future. No. He said, I would want that church of my youth. I want my children to have what they had. But then this realization came up. We can't do it the same way we always did it if we're going to meet the needs of the youth of today. Dean, you talked about today, we were talking about culture after Bible study and the stuff that kids wear today. Right? Your mom would have patched those holes, and these kids pay big dollars for stuff with holes in them. Right? And
For what?
And so think, if you think their clothes have changed, you got to see with what they're dealing with. Right? And what they have going on in their life. So, it used to be, my great-grandfather was out there pitching to you rotten kids in suit and tie. We still have to relate to kids. It's just not done the same way. It's about the future. How do we do that? Some of these technologies in the back, it's funny, Ross and Amanda are both, Ross under 40?
No.
He is 40.
He's older than
I'm
I.
sorry. We're behind, right? Christian's been instrumental in help through this. Look to the future stuff. Right? How do we keep up with it? How do we know how to reach other people? That's why we have to have youth. I'm already getting washed up. Right? I'm not the young guy anymore. We need, comparatively to some. It's the first argument I've had throughout this whole series. What's Hebrews 12 and 2 say? Looking to the author and finisher of our faith. For the joy endured or suffered the cross. We talked about all these people in Hebrews 11. All those people in the past, what were they doing? Looking to the future. And then we're told, look to Jesus, who in the first chapters prior is demonstrated, has moved into the future. I'm sorry for those of you online. I realized I lost my mic a while ago. But he'd moved into the future. There's some things, I can't emphasize this enough. If we are not taking the truth of Jesus to our community, we aren't worth existing as a group. It's the only thing of value. Some things don't change. We've got to constantly be looking to the future. I think our best days are ahead. I state this periodically. And but we've got an amazing group. Amazing group. And youngsters, I want you to know this. If you'd pause just a second, Anna. I know where you're heading, but give me just a second. You guys are a great inspiration to me. And you're a great encouragement to all these people. And you guys are going to keep that up. You're going to be a part of the beautiful future Christ's work in the church. This evening, if we can help you with your spiritual need, whether you're young, whether you're not so young, please make that known. If we can pray with you, if we can encourage you, if you have any spiritual need whatsoever, please make it known.